Hey guys, what the fuck is up? Today we are doing a Battlefield tips and tricks video. I hope you enjoy. I figured this would be cool to do because, I feel like I've gotten to a good place in Battlefield where I might be able to give some input. If you don't believe me, or if you're asking, why should I believe you, we can go over my statistics really quickly. I know it doesn't mean that much, but consider this my resume to you guys, so maybe that'll sway you in believing me or not. I have around a 2.7 KD, and I'm pushing like 900 score per minute. And I'm completely new to Battlefield. It wasn't until like a month or two ago that I really understood how to, raise my score a lot. And, my KD now, if I was to like reset my stats, I feel would be around a 4.0, and I'd be pushing over 1,000 SPM. But whatever. I mean, that's just me, bullshitting. I hope that does it for you guys, and, maybe you'll be able to, hear me out a little bit. So the way I'm going to structure this, by the way, this tips and tricks video is not going to be short. I'm going to go in depth if you're an aggressive player or defensive player, how to set up your guns, how to, be the best killer that you possibly can be. We're going to be using the assault class in order to really go through this whole tutorial. I think it's just the easiest way for us to all digest some knowledge here. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you're looking at your cool character here, you want to put on a cool camouflage, right? That's the first thing you really want to do. You want to be balling a little bit. You want to feel good about yourself. So I put on the Firestarter camo. Boom. We're looking pretty. Okay, next up we have the field upgrades. And you can choose between a lot of them, but for me, I'm an incredibly aggressive player, so I use defensive. It's weird how that works, but because of the fact that you reduce incoming damage to the chest by 10%, it makes it so it's easier for me to be aggressive and take shots. On top of that, I don't get one-shotted by snipers too often, so defensive is the way to go. Knife doesn't matter. Now, the grenades is where you're going to really want to start to set up your type of playstyle, right? This is where we're going to start to get a little deeper here. Figure out the type of player that you want to be before you even decide to structure your classes. Are you going to be aggressive, defensive, more support-oriented, going for the objective, just get the fuck on the objective, or what are you going to do? Well, for me personally, I'm an incredibly aggressive player. So I use RGO impacts, but if I was going to be defensive, I would use V40 minis. Everything else is pretty, specialized. Like incendiary grenades are good for cutting off a doorway for a few seconds. Smoke grenades are good for, smoke cover for a few seconds. Flashbangs, hand flares, no one really uses those, but flashbangs are okay. But let me explain why impacts are good for aggressive players. If you whip out the impact grenade, and we'll spawn up real quick, you can see impact grenades don't go that far, and they explode instantly. So if I'm being aggressive and I'm running around doing cool things, I'm going to want something that doesn't go too far because I'm going to be in people's faces. Now, if I'm a defensive player, impact grenades won't work. Because you see, when I toss one, it doesn't go anywhere. It just doesn't go anywhere, so there's no point in using those. Now, if you're going to be defensive, you should be using the V40 minis. Okay, so for all of you defensive tactical players out there, we would whip out the V40 minis, and here's why. If I go to the same spot I was just in, you toss a V40 mini, and, I mean, you can bury bonds this thing. This thing goes forever. Look at that. That's a 90-mile-an-hour pitch. Boom. And then they blow up almost on impact when you throw them a long distance away, which is really perfect. That's exactly what you want. Okay. So now that you have a feel for the type of grenades that you want, which may be self-explanatory, gadgets, I'd assume that is too, but I typically roll medic bag. This is really, you can get kind of crazy with this. I see people use these M320s all the time. You can do whatever you want, experiment, and figure out which one works for you. I like the medic bag because it's this little bag of orgasmic awesomeness. I mean, it's this little magical bag that just heals everyone. It's this loving embrace of Battlefield, and I love it. Defibrillators, it's always good, so you can, heal your teammate. First aid pack, those are, not really needed because they don't heal you that quickly, and you just don't get as many points for them. It just doesn't help as much. So I wouldn't use first aid pack. Now, this is where we can start to get a little crazy here. Primary weapon and secondary weapon. As I said, remember, how do you want to play? How are you going to set up your guns? In Battlefield, this is where I can go on a little bit of a rant here before we dive into the setups. In my opinion, as a player who is incredibly aggressive, I like to run around. Dude, I'll run around with 50 health on, just shooting people. And I know that's not the smart thing to do, but I'm a very aggressive player. And Battlefield does not award aggressive players. They award aggressive teams, but not players. So if I'm running around being a crazy person and my whole team is designed to play really tactical, really slow, it's much harder for me to do stuff. So that's why I've kind of configured my weapons to the best of my ability. So if you're an aggressive player, the first thing that you want to do is figure out what gun is right for you. So for your primary weapon, you know, obviously if you're an engineer support or a recon, it's going to change, but you want to get a gun that has a high rate of fire, because when you get up close and personal, you want to make sure that you can just win all the time. And RPM has a huge impact on whether you're going to win those up-close gunfights. So if I get an up-close gunfight with an ACR and I start rocking and rolling, I'm probably going to win against somebody who uses an AK-5C, simply because the AK-5C has a lower RPM. So, you know, I would use the AK-5C if I'm more long-range oriented, or an ACR if I'm more up-close and oriented. The rate of fire matters the most. You can go to Simfig, you can go really in-depth if you want to, but trust me, it really comes down to how the gun feels and the rate of fire. That is probably the most important. Now, if you want to be accurate, then you might want to choose a gun that has in between 700 and 800 RPM, but that's completely up to you. Now, attachments for the gun, this is where it gets kind of, you know, little frisky. So for an ACR, I use a folding grip, and we can get into that. But for the most part, you always want to use a muzzle brake. You always want to use a stubby grip. But that can change radically. If you're using a gun that has maybe no recoil at all, but a lot of left and right sway to it when you shoot, you'd want to use a compensator. But if you have a gun that has a lot of recoil, you'd want to use a muzzle brake. Do you see what I mean? So if the gun recoils left to right, or sways left to right while you're shooting it, when you're aiming in, that's when you would use a compensator. Underbarrel, if you're using a high rate of fire gun, then sometimes a folding grip or an angled grip would be good, because when you burst fire your gun, right? Because I can't go full auto with an ACR. If I want to kill people medium range, I have to burst fire my weapon. And if I want to burst fire my weapon, that means that I really want that first shot to have zero recoil. That way the whole burst is really just very easy to use. And we can go over how good a folding grip is. And you can see right here, when I just burst fire this gun, it has almost no recoil, just like that. Look at that. So easy. I'm almost firing single shot, but you can fire so quickly. I mean, just zero recoil. I'm barely even controlling it. So that is why I would use a folding grip on a high rate of fire gun, but you don't have to. A stubby grip works equally well. Now, in terms of your sight, this really doesn't matter. You can use a coyote sight. I would advise against any medium range sight, or, you know, a FLIR or an IRNV, unless you're playing Conquest or a really, you know, huge map where that might come into play. I typically run the coyote sight. It does everything I need, and maybe if I'm playing on too bright of a map where the colors are really extreme, I'll use the Cobra just because there's more to look through, if that makes any sense. Like, a coyote sight can get lost in the fire. If there's like a big explosion and you aim into the fire, you just can't see anything. It's just hard sometimes. So you may not always want to use a coyote sight. But for the secondary weapon, I always use a 93R. I've seen people use the Shorty 12G, that, you know, mini shotgun. I've seen people use the P226. The 93R is literally a mini M16. I think it's probably one of the best pistols in the game. And that's really all it comes down to, your preference. The G18 is also very good. Now, when it comes to setting up guns, you can see I have no accessory. And the reason why is because, let's say I put on a tri-beam laser, alright, and I start scoping in at a target, then the enemy is going to see that laser. I'm going to be more noticeable on the map. And on top of that, if somebody throws a smoke grenade and I aim through the smoke, then I will be easily visible, and nobody wants that. I mean, look at this laser. I mean, it's all over the place. It's so noticeable. I hate it. I don't use it. And when I see other really, really good players running around, they don't use it either. So I typically just take that bad boy off. Don't even worry about it. I don't even run an accessory. I mean, you could use a magnifier if you want, but the problem with a magnifier is that it actually takes up a lot of your screen. I mean, you lose a lot of peripheral vision with that, and then you have to, you know, putting it on is just a pain in the ass too. You know, you can see when I put it on, it takes a long time to do that. But if that's what you want to get into, that's what you want to get into. Okay, so that does it for the guns, guys. You know, it really comes down to preference at the end of the day, but more than anything, if you want to be a good Battlefield player, you gotta have confidence, right? Because you know, when I picked up this game, if I wasn't confident in my abilities, you know, I'd probably end up doing stuff I didn't like doing, because Battlefield really does reward, you know, campy playstyle, and a campy playstyle, and I don't mean that offensively at all. It's just, if you're, you know, deciding to strafe a little bit while you aim in, you're probably not going to get as accurate of a kill. You know, when you're standing still and zooming in, that's when you're at your most accurate. So, for me personally, I have to have high rate of fire guns. I have to do all this, you know, little tinkering to my setup, because Battlefield awards campy playstyles. You don't run that quickly. You know, if you're running around and you decide to zoom in or L trigger really quickly, it takes a little longer. So, you know, standing still and looking through a window is almost more skillful, or more what Battlefield, you know, applies to, than running around and trying to kill people. And that makes sense, because it's a tactically based game. But for me, I have to be aggressive. So that's how I have set up my guns. You know, I use an ACR. Sometimes I'll use an M16 if I absolutely have to. I love the M16. You know, the A91 is a great choice. The MTAR is a great choice. All high rate of fire guns below 1,000 RPM, in my opinion, are great. The AEK just dominates people. It's really ridiculous how good the AEK can be, especially if you decide to burst fire it. I don't use an angled foregrip on the AEK, because I feel like I can manage the recoil just fine on my own. But I mean, this thing, it just rips people up. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's no reason you should ever lose an up-close gunfight with this weapon. So, again, guys, you gotta be confident. You know, you really gotta be confident. You gotta believe in yourself. And I know it sounds silly. It's like, oh, that's just some, like, silly, you know, stupid bullshit. It's really not. If you really love playing video games, or whatever it is, if you think you're going to be the best, if you have complete and total psychotic confidence in yourself, chances are you're going to be good when you start playing the game. That's why when you see these MLG pros, whenever they transition over to other games, they're amazing at them. They just pick them up so quickly. Part of the reason why is because they already know that they're good. They understand, you know, game mechanics on a level that most people don't. So it really... But more so than anything, it's confidence. They've been there before. They know how to become good at a game. They know how to work hard. They know how to be confident. They know how to, you know, just believe in themselves. You know, just saying, like, you know, I'm the best player in the fucking game. You don't have to tell everybody, but just say it in your head, man. Be like, yo, I'm the best. You know, you can be humble and, you know, be sure to, you know, make sure that you can take in criticism. But for the most part, you know, you gotta, you know, you gotta pat yourself on the back. You know, don't go too hard on yourself. If you don't understand something, or if you have questions, post it in the comment section below. But for the most part, that's it, guys. It's really not much more complicated than that. Yeah, there are netcode issues. Yeah, you know, in terms of gun mechanics and, you know, running around and shooting stuff, it's not the most deep game that I could ever think of, but it's still a great game. I love Battlefield. And on top of that, you know, if you want to be aggressive, you can be. You just got to, you know, tweak your setup a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, guys, that does it for me. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to see more, I can go way more in depth in terms of baiting people, in terms of trying to outsmart them, outthink them like chess. You know, we can go into that, but that would be part 2, and that would be equally long. So let me know what you guys want to see. And if you like this, then give it a like or comment or anything like that. I don't give a fuck. Anyways, I'm out. Lots of stuff to do today because it stopped snowing, so I'm happy. Anyways, take it easy. Love you guys.